Trigger chosen, betrayed by a best friend. 1. Setup. I was a hopeful, hard-working man built from long days that started before the sun and songs that ended with the dawn still bright on the windows. I believed in loyalty the way others believe in luck, as if it could be touched and counted. I had a circle I trusted. Luca, my best friend since we shared crayons and contracts in college, a partner who laughed with me and never at me. Mia, my wife, who kept the flame alive even when the numbers looked cold, and Mr. Hale, a mentor who taught me to guard the work I loved as if it were a child. We built a small design studio from nothing, turning drafts into products and incidents into steady days. We jabbed with humor and shoulder-bladed confidence, and at night I could feel the room fill with the quiet buzz of possibility. I slept with the certainty that my bloodlines were true and that my promises meant something more than words. The town we came from taught patience, and I wore it like a badge. My hands carried the tremor of a craftsman who knew the weight of wood and the weight of time. I trusted Luca with my most embarrassing truths, with my fears about the future, with the way I worried the bills would swallow us whole if the next month failed to bring a miracle. Mia trusted him too, or so I believed, because she stood at the door of every late-night meeting with tea and a smile that hid nothing from me. And Mr. Hale, who spoke softly about character and consequence, reminded me to practice restraint even when the wind howled in our faces. We were not perfect, but we were a unit, a string of moments tugging us towards something larger than ourselves, something called a future we could all call our own. I remember the way the office smelled of rain and coffee and the smear of markers on the glass walls, the way Luca's voice carried through the room like a beacon, the way Mia would press her cheek against mine as if to borrow my courage, the way Hale would nod at a sketch and declare with a careful smile that the idea could change the town if we kept our hands clean. I carried a stubborn belief that the trust we had earned could weather every storm, that the bond we forged in the furnace of late nights and shared drafts would melt under the heat. We had not yet learned what the world could do to even the strongest ties, but we believed we could hold fast. 2. Inciting incident. It happened on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and old money. We were pitching to a room full of investors who wore smiles shorter than their patience, and Luca stood beside me like a second spine, the way we had rehearsed in the countless hours before. Then the room shifted, the lights dimmed, and his eyes flashed with a confidence that did not fit the moment. He spoke as if the plan were his own, as if the hours I have bled over every line and diagram were irrelevant, as if the work I poured into every sketch was merely the warm-up. The documents in the projector glowed with his name in bold, with his signature in the margins where mine used to be. The investors nodded, the room warmed, and for a heartbeat I could see the one doorway out of the trap. If I lied to myself about what I saw, I could pretend it was a mistake, a misprint, a momentary misalignment. But that moment stretched long, and the air grew heavier with the quiet click of a keyboard and the soft tremor of a drink hitting a glass. I looked at Luca, and his smile told me something I did not want to hear. The man I trusted most had chosen his ascent over our partnership, over the life we built. He had stitched our concept into his own brand, recycled our research into a story that ended with him as founder and me as a ghost. After the meeting, the laughter around the hall tasted sour on my tongue. The messages from investors arrived with a practiced warmth that felt like a blade sliding between ribs. Luca had cut us free from the future we swore we would share, and in that instant I understood the weight of betrayal. Not a blunt attack, but a whisper that hollowed out your courage until your knees trembled and your breath came in ragged drafts. Mia, who had watched with me from the back corner of the room, did not touch my arm to steady me. She did not call that night to offer a soft place to rest. Instead, she waited for a finished script, a new reality where Luca could parade my work as his own, and where I would either bend to his version or be crushed by the truth I refused to admit in the moment. The room's bright lights blurred into a single accusing spotlight, and I stood there, feeling the room shrink until it could no longer hold the pain. Tears did not come first. Fear did. Fear that I would become nothing more than a cautionary tale about trust. Fear that the life we built would vanish into the swirl of lawsuits and the cold judgments of strangers who never learned the hours we burned to keep promises. Fear that I had not known a friend well enough to recognize when he stood at the edge of the rail, ready to jump, ready to pull me off with him. The pain was raw and personal and humiliating. Not a public shaming, but a private wound that someone else had turned into a spectacle. In the days that followed, Luca did not look at me the way a friend should. He never apologized. He never explained beyond a brief clinical note about alignment of visions and reallocating resources. The trust I carried for years snapped and fell away like glass from a shattered window. The betrayal was not just about a product. It was about the belief that a man I had walked through fire with could snatch the light from my eyes and claim to have lit up the room all along. The sting would not fade. Rising action. I did not crumble. I sank into a winter of quiet, mechanical work and careful listening. I learned to hear the truth in the notes of a conversation and the way a person's voice paused on certain syllables. I stopped blaming and began watching. I studied Luca as if he were a patient subject in a dangerous experiment. I listened when he spoke about growth and control, noting the way he used phrases like momentum and scalability, as if they were charms to ward off a child's cry. I started to rebuild in the margins, where the world did not look. I introduced myself to a few people who had once doubted me and who now believed I could still finish what I started. Some were engineers who trusted me because I had never demanded loyalty as a hostage. Others were small funders who believed in craft more than slogans. I found allies in unlikely corners. People who shared a prejudice for the fairness that Luca had betrayed. People who knew what it felt like to have a dream stolen and to watch the thief pretend he was the beneficiary of your patient work. I moved slowly and with a cool patience that surprised even me. I hired a small team not to imitate Luca, but to outlearn him. We pinned the first clues to a new system that was not a copy, but a refinement, an improved version that would prove our original concept was more than a spark. I gathered timestamp drafts, emails with hidden margins that showed the true authorship, and a catalogue of client conversations that confirmed the uniqueness of the idea we had built from the ground up. The scent of rain on the apartment window and the murmur of late-night traffic became my soundtrack. I worked with a quiet fury, a careful strategy that looked harmless on the surface, but carried a steady, cold weight underneath. Some nights I stood by a window and watched the city glow with its predatory lights, and I told myself that patience was the fiercest weapon a man could wield when his name was being dragged through mud by a friend who forgot what loyalty meant. My body remembered the old days, the long walks to the studio, the clatter of keyboards, the rhythm of a plan taking shape. My mind learned a new kind of discipline, one that did not seek anger, but used it as fuel to sharpen reason. I learned how to act without visible heat, how to move assets and minds without leaving footprints. The hours stacked. The proof most crucial grew more solid, and the whispers about the betrayal faded into the background as the work advanced. 4. Climax. The night of reckoning came at the very moment printed words and bright lights always betray a man who has hidden pain for too long. Luca stood on a stage at a conference that branded itself as the battlefront for a new era in our field. I stood in the crowd, not to confront him with force, but to reveal the truth with evidence polished by time and restraint. When his speech swelled with triumph, I watched as he finally let his mask slip for a fraction of a second. That tiny lapse that told the room more than any line could. This was not the version of events we had lived side by side. The lights stung, and the crowd leaned in as if they could taste the difference between his manufactured narrative and the real, stubborn truth. Then the slide came up. A straight line of facts and dates. A timeline that showed who created what, who wrote what, who signed what, and when. The projector hummed. I felt the air shift around me, the quiet crescendo building into something almost holy. Luca tried to speak, but the room no longer listened to him. They listened to the documents. They listened to the silence between lines, and they saw what I had seen long ago, hidden in plain sight. His version of the story did not match the hours I had bled into the project. The investors, for once, did not clap with a practiced smile. They leaned forward, reading the pages as if they were the only map home. Luca's face went pale, the words dying on his lips before a real apology could form. In that moment, I did not raise my voice. I did not ruin him with fury. I stood there and let the fact stand on its own. A stern, clean verdict, delivered by the honest weight of truth. The room erupted in a new energy, a wave of murmurs that turned into decisive agreements. The board asked me to take over the project, to lead the next phase, to show them the way. Luca watched his plans crumble into the ash of his own ambition, a lifetime of little betrayals spearing toward him in the form of consequences that would not be reversed. The moment was not a roar, but a slow sunrise, and I felt a cool, quiet triumph bloom in my chest, as if a heavy dam had given way, and a clean stream finally ran free. 5. Redemption arc. The pain did not vanish with his fall. It became the fuel for something larger than revenge. I did not chase into ruin, but I did build something that would outlast our old shame. I started a foundation, a small but relentless beacon for those who poured their hearts into ideas that they believed would change the world, only to have them hijacked by someone with a bigger ego. I traveled with the message that healing does not mean forgetting, that strength does not require cruelty, and that a man can be generous with the pain that once nearly destroyed him. I wrote a book, not a tell-all, but a map. How to protect your labor, how to recognize a friend turned rival, how to turn ruin into a road for others. The